Welcome to the Raising Smart Kids podcast. I'm your host, Yang Pratt, and each week we'll explore ways in which the arts can help you raise a smarter kid. I'll be sharing ways the arts can propel your child's learning and interviewing top artists, educators, and entrepreneurs. These guests will share why the arts are so very important to your child, along with actionable ideas you can easily implement into your already busy schedule. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast here on iTunes and share us with a friend. For extra tips on raising smart kids, head on over to artsmartparenting.com and click on the Live tab.
So I like to use the metaphor, think of it as you're dating yourself. You're constantly trying to get to know who you are. You're constantly trying to court yourself and make sure they're taken care of. And then that's just something you want to do for yourself every day. And that's really what self-care is.
And that's so true, too, because as soon as you said bubble baths and those sort of things, that's exactly what I have in my mind. And I think that's probably an old notion of what self-care is. So your analogy about courting yourself and really being able to meet this new person and really showing up as your best is such an interesting take on the word self-care. I love that. So if moms are new to self-care, then what is the first thing you would have them do to start on this journey? Because I know it's not a race, definitely a journey as we uncover layers of ourselves through the process. What's the first thing you would recommend?
The first thing I would recommend would be definitely making it a priority. So even if you're just starting off with bubble baths and stuff, scheduling it so that it is a priority. It's something that's non-negotiable in your life. And then as you start making that more of a routine, then start connecting with yourself. So start finding out what your needs really are. Start being honest with yourself about what you're needing out of your daily life and more routinely. So then that way you can develop a self-care routine around that.
Okay. So I'm going to back up to the scheduling it, because I think this is really what gets lost a lot of times. That it seems so silly for us to write on the calendar, take a bubble bath or take a nap. But I think we're all so overscheduled that if we don't put it there on the schedule where everybody in the family can see it, it gets pushed to the bottom. So, because I know that I would feel guilty, because moms feel that a lot, where when we take time to do something for ourselves, there's always that thought of, well, I could be doing the dishes, or I could be folding the laundry, or I could be taking my kid to ice cream, or all these other thoughts are going to my mind. So how do we silence that, or how do we get that to not be so loud in the background?
Yeah, so that's actually a big part of scheduling it, is so then that way you know that it's non-negotiable. I have time set aside specifically for this. So then maybe the dishes are already done, or maybe you can do the dishes later on in the evening. And it kind of helps other people if they see that it's non-negotiable. It kind of helps other people from, hey, do you mind running this errand for me at this time? And then you can always point to your calendar and be like, oh, I already scheduled something for that time. So, but the mom guilt is definitely something that blocks a lot of women from practicing self-care. And I think the biggest part to kind of combat that is just recognizing that you're not doing it for selfish reasons. You're actually doing it because later on it helps you be more present and gives more quality to when you are with that person or with your kids.
Absolutely. So can we dive a little bit into your routine? So in a typical week, what are some things that you're doing and you're scheduling on your calendar that are non-negotiable for yourself?
So I'm an awful morning person. Mornings are really rough for me.
I hear you.
So, but what I did was I actually started waking up earlier, which is super odd. But I found that, with my son, when I'm waking up later, then I'm rushing to get through my day, and then I just start off my day chaotic. So then I started scheduling, I'm waking up a lot earlier so that I can have a full 45 minutes to an hour just to myself. So then I'm lounging around the house. I take my shower. And then I do some journaling, and then I listen to music, and then I do all of that without, my son hanging onto my leg. And then usually he stirs awake, and then I start my regular morning routine. And then in the afternoon, my son goes to bed at 8:15.
Wow.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you have to be in bed, and then he goes to bed, and then I journal again if I want to, or I do something I'll read, or I might go read through a couple of blogs or something like that. But I do something for myself before I start working onto my business too. So then those are the two things that are like,
Yeah.
those are non-negotiable for me.
Yeah, I love that. The morning routine, I think, is key because I find the mornings that like you said, if I'm rushing and the kids are up before me, it just feels like I can never catch up. So I know
Yeah.
it's difficult to set that clock early, and I'm guilty, so guilty of pushing the snooze button to say, no, no, a couple more minutes. And then before I know it, a half an hour has elapsed and the kids are up and, they're making the breakfast and I'm feeling a little bad that I wasn't up before them. But I know
Yeah.
we have to sort of just let that go and be able to say, okay, that's how it is today, and let's just move on.
Yeah.
I want to talk about journaling. I know that there's so many studies that talk about the benefits of journaling and how that helps us. I can say though for myself, I've never been a journaler. I've been inspired to start them, but I've never
Mm-hmm.
developed the habit of doing it. And I listened to you on another podcast and you said you had journals back from when you were like in third grade or something, and you can go back and
Yep.
read those. So talk a little bit about how journaling benefits us and how moms can maybe get that as part of either their morning routine or their evening routine.
So the journaling is just really like a catharsis for me. So I know a lot of people think of journaling as like dear diary, today my
Yeah.
day went this way or something like that. But like for me, sometimes it's just writing down quotes or a poem or it's just like doodling. And I think something like that can really help be an outlet for your frustration. And then it's a place where you can be honest with yourself too.
Yeah.
So then like something that you might not say out loud or like perhaps a feeling that you want to work through, you can write that down in your journal and you don't really, you can be honest with yourself about that and then you can find a way to work through that. So, that helps with mom guilt too. Like some days are really, really rough, but I'm not going to go up to my son and be like, hey, you were, you were a terrible tooth today, but I can write that down and, work through that. So.
Okay. That's great. And I love the reference to the Dear Diary because I think when I learned to journal in school, it was an assignment and we actually had to do that Dear Diary, this is how the day was. And I always felt so silly documenting those things. But now as I look back, I wish that I would have because there are lessons that I could have learned by having certain things happen in my day or not happen and how I related to a situation or how I could have done that differently. So I think that is such a brilliant thing to do. And I find that if I had the choice, I think I probably would hop onto a video versus having to write because by the time I'm done writing, I'll go back and I'm not able to even read the thing because it's just, I get so, when I do write things like this, I get so crazy and, there's pictures and doodles and there's just a bunch of stuff that there's no way I could ever go back and read it. So perhaps video journaling would be the next, like, confessions of sort of thing to be able to record frustrations because then, for me anyway, that might be the next evolution of how I might be journaling. Yeah. So when you're talking about the journaling, you do it in the morning and then in the evening. Talk about how those things are different and like what you're really thinking about on those two different times during your day.
So in the morning, I tend to focus on like my goals and how I want my day to go, and kind of make sure that I'm not bringing like any negative feelings into my new day. So then, like if yesterday was really rough, I want to make sure I'm not like still sulking in it, or at least it helps me be mindful of the fact that it is still affecting me. So that's really how the morning journaling goes. And then in the evening, it's just like a reflection, or sometimes it's just like something inspired me during the day. So I'm writing a poem or I'm writing a short story. So evenings are a little bit more flexible as far as creativity and stuff like that. That's where I really outlet that part of myself.
And do you think that it's beneficial for moms to sit and journal with their kids, maybe make it a nighttime routine where they can talk about their day and then they can write? I'm just not I've never experienced that myself, but I'm just wondering if that's something you ever recommend.
Yeah, so that's actually how I got into journaling, is because my mom, she journals. So I watched her often like sitting down in the living room and she's writing in her journal, and then I saw like her just piles of journals. So then that's how I started. And then it can also be a good way to communicate with your kids. So you can have your personal journal, their journal, and then you can have like a journal that you guys share, and then you guys can communicate back and forth that way. So like, this is how I'm feeling, and then you can write back to how whatever you want to respond to that. So
I love this idea about the the combined journal because my oldest is now 13, and there's lots of just changes in her body, and there's hormones, and some days I want to kind of walk to the other room because she's really feeling some
yeah.
emotions and is not sure how to express it, so it just comes across as she's being angry or she's trying to be rebellious, and I know that's not the case. But I love the thought about being able to leave her a note and then she can
Hmm.
write me a note back. And I just think there's something magical about that. So I definitely want to give that a shot because that might help resolve some of the issues we're facing as mother and daughter. And, I own a performing arts school. And so now she also has me for a lot of her classes. So that produces some other interesting emotions and feelings. And so, yeah, this is kind of brilliant. I love this combined journal. So I think that's going to be my next thing on my to-do list.
Yeah, it's a great way because then you're able to be honest too. Like some things, like you look at your mom and you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to tell you that, but
Yeah.
I might write it down. So
Yeah, no, that is so brilliant. It's almost like passing notes in the classroom where you can just sort of say, you write a note to your crush, I have a crush on you. And you pass it through three friends to get there. But this is kind of cool that it sort of has that feel where it's sort of secret, but you can still say a lot of stuff that, like you said, you would never say out loud. So awesome. I'm gonna write that down right now to get the journal because I just think that's brilliant. So let's talk about your journey on how you got to really start talking about and coaching women about self-care. How did you get to the place where you decided, yes, that's what I want to do and this is who I want to help?
so it's actually a long process for me. It basically started like when I completely burned out and things started falling apart. When I started making self care a priority,
Mm-hmm.
is when I absolutely had to. It's like, well, there's no other choice, or I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna fall apart. So I started making it a self care journey for myself, and then when I started seeing the effects it was having, I started noticing that some of the because I worked at a child care center, so I started noticing like some of the moms would come in and they had like that same kind of energy around themselves that I did,
Mm.
and it was like, well, like I've been through it, so maybe I can actually help other women. So then I kind of tested it out, and it turns out that it was helping. So I moved forward with the idea.
All right, so I want to go back to you talked about you discovered self care in a time when you really needed it most. Without having to go into too many private details, what was it? Like, what was that moment in time or that event that said you decided, yeah, this is not working anymore. I have to make time for myself, or nothing else is going to work?
It was like a lot of the things that I had been expecting like weren't working out the way that I wanted it to. So then I was just falling apart
Mm.
constantly, like constantly. So that was kind of when, after like a couple of friends prompting me, and then me just, like this isn't normal. Like, these
Yeah.
things, I shouldn't be quite so sensitive about these things. That's when I was like, okay, maybe something's off. Maybe I'm not taking care of myself the way I need to. So then that really kind of prompted my exploration into self care and taking care of myself a little bit better.
And what great friends you have to sort of be brave enough to say, hello, there's something happening and you need to fix
Yeah.
it. I'm going to stop hanging out with you. I'm not sure what they said, but I can sort of, in my mind's eye, sort of see how that would go. But I know that in our society, we seem to be one in which that we don't always express our concerns to the people we care about. We just sort of think they already know. And we may have reservations about it, but we don't want to say it. If there are listeners today who are either in this situation or who have friends who are in situations like this, what advice could you give them on how to help their friends or themselves overcome this or realize that this is happening in their lives?
I think the biggest part was that my friends were all like, they weren't quite judgmental about it. They were very subtle about it. So then they'd start by offering like, hey, maybe I can take your son for a little bit.
Okay.
And then, they more or less like force me to give up my son.
Got it.
Or they'd check in and they'd be really genuine about it. So then they wouldn't offer me advice or anything. They would just sit down and be like, hey, what's going on? And then they would sit there and they would wait.
Okay.
And so it was really I think just lending your ear first and then being, really caring about it can really help them want to open up. So at the time, they might not need advice at the moment, or they might not necessarily be, looking
Mm-hmm.
for words of wisdom. They might just need somebody to listen. And then that can like open up some doors for, you know, some things that they might not have noticed.
No, and that's brilliant too, because as friends and as people going through these things, we don't want to have someone rushing around and shaking us by the shoulder saying, what's wrong with you? We definitely
Yeah.
need that friend who can just stand next to us and hold our hand and or cry with us, or like you said, offer to take your son just because they can see it. So listeners,
Hmm.
if you have a friend in your life who you can see is just getting really frazzled and they're not quite themselves, yeah, offer to grab their kids, offer to take them to coffee, get them away, and just let them be in a different environment so
Yeah.
they might be able to start opening up about the situation going on.
Hmm.
You mentioned earlier when you were working at the child care center that you would see women come in, see these moms come in, and they had this energy about them. Talk about this energy and what that was.
So it was almost like a lot of women describe it as survival mode. So then,
Mm,
like, they'd walk in and they wouldn't necessarily look frazzled, but you can like feel it, and like the way they move, the way that they dropped off their kids, the way that they said goodbye. It was almost like frazzled, and they were just like
yeah.
they needed to go, and they needed to get to the next thing, and they weren't really like stopping to pause, you know. So there's like really a difference between that kind of energy. So I started noticing it because I recognized it
Mm-hmm.
in myself. So then I started to notice it around the other women, because a lot of the times it can kind of be, you might just see it as just rushing, like maybe they're just late, but there's definitely like a subtle like tone to it.
Yeah.
So
And it's so interesting too, because it's just like when you go to buy a new car or you're looking for a car, all of a sudden you see it everywhere. And so I think in
mhm.
this situation, the same thing. Once you started noticing those feelings and that anxiety, I guess, in yourself, it became more apparent everywhere you looked. So that's really quite interesting.
Yeah.
And the fact that our kids pick up on that
Mhm.
is really something we should be mindful of, because I know for me, when parents bring their kids, and maybe they're 3, to a very first dance class, for instance, there's some anxiety there, but most of it is not coming from the child. Most of it is coming
Right.
from mom because they've never been to an activity before, and how on earth are they going to survive 30 minutes of time without mom? Like, what's that going to
Right.
feel like? So it's funny because we're not only dealing with the emotions of our students, it's really the parents too. And I find that being able to take a step back and like you said, realizing what it is, and then being able to say, okay, take a breath. How can I help you? How can I make this better? And we actually put together a series of little videos saying, hey, we just got done with the first week. You might be feeling these things. And if you do,
Mm.
it's okay. Just because when you're doing anything new, it always tends to bring the anxiety. But really, again, kids, I feel, don't often, it's not manifesting themselves. It's not manifesting in them as a natural occurrence. It's
Right.
coming off of us directly, which makes me so sad to think that when I'm grumpy, my kids are tending to be grumpy too, and then I get upset with them thinking, wait, why are you grumpy? So then I have to look at myself and say, no, no, no. Oh, I'm sorry. It was me. I'm really grumpy and I apologize. So let's start the conversation over again because, yeah, it's not a good place to be. Excellent. So I want you to talk about your group. I know on Facebook you're very active there. Talk about the group you've created there and how our listeners can be part of it.
So the Facebook group is a closed group just for moms, and the name of it is Mynameisnotmommy. And it's just a group for women to really connect. And I put a lot of resources inside of it to help develop your self-care routine, or be more mindful of it. And that's where I post a lot of the free downloads and content and do my live videos and stuff. So it's really easy to join. You just hit join like any other group, and then we'd approve you. So
Okay. And how
yeah.
many women are currently in that group?
I believe it's 250 now,
Okay.
going up. So
Excellent. And that's such a great place to be too. I know that there's tons of pages on Facebook to be, but when it's public, it doesn't feel like anyone's listening, or
Mhm.
I tend personally not to want to share as much stuff when it's a public page and everyone can look at it. So the allure
Yeah.
of being in a small group is definitely something that I prefer. So if moms are looking to be part of this group, they can go to Facebook and find you there. What are some of the other things you do to help moms on this journey of self-discovery and self-care?
So I actually have a blog called Make It to 18. So then there's a couple of posts on there about self care. But the main site, Mynameisnotmommy.com, it has different workbooks that you can go through. So then those workbooks help you reconnect with like who you are, the kind of things that you need, like authentic self care. So what's actually helping you, what kind of things you can probably cross off of your list. And then there's a couple of e-courses on there
Okay.
too that moms can take. So.
All right, I want to talk about these e-courses. I know
Mhm.
some moms, like we spend a lot of time on technology just because our businesses sort of need this part to exist. For moms who are not so tech savvy, what how is an online course going to benefit them? What does it look like, and what is their, I guess, involvement level?
So the course is really just a way for them to think a little bit more deeper. So then, as you're going through, like as you're developing a self care routine, especially if you're new to it, there's a lot of questions that you won't necessarily ask yourself, or there's a lot of things that you won't be honest with
Mm-hmm.
yourself about. So the courses are really just there to kind of guide you to make sure that the self care routine that you are developing is actually authentic to what
Okay.
you actually need. So it's a guide, and there's a lot of like journal prompts and a lot of worksheets and stuff to really get you thinking deeper about the subject.
Okay. Excellent. So, talk about how self-care is going to make our listeners better mommies.
So the cliche analogy is you can't pour from an empty cup.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to practice self care on a regular basis because in that way, what you project and what you output is that much better. So a lot of women feel guilty because they're like you said earlier, I could be doing the dishes
Yep.
and stuff. But just like that 1 hour that you took to yourself, imagine like if you're happier and you're more refreshed than like the hour that you are playing with your kids, you're actually present and
Yes.
you're not overly tired and you're not grumpy. So just taking care of yourself makes sure that the things that you give are that much more better, especially as a mom.
Absolutely. And I think, like you said, being present with your kids. I know my youngest is 10 right now, and she'll often say to me, "Well, Mom, we didn't really hang out because you were on the computer or you were on the phone, you were emailing." And I have to think, oh, that's true. I thought it was going to be like this 5 minute thing, but she perceives it as this bigger event. So now I have to be really conscientious of, okay, the phone is in the other room. I have to disconnect from everything, and it's her and I. So even if we're going
Mm-hmm.
to sit and watch a little show and cuddle up together, she wants to know I'm totally present with her. So our new
Mm-hmm.
rule is that if we're enjoying a show together, there's no other devices in the room with us, because it's so easy to just pick something up and look at the email or scroll through Facebook and 2 hours pass. So that's the rule in our house, is that you get to do one technology thing at a time. It's either the phone or the computer, or maybe if you want to play a game or read a book. Those are the options, but only one can exist. The rest of them don't even get to come into the room anymore, just because it's way too easy for us to fall back on that very bad habit.
That's super awesome. I'll have to put that into my routine too. I hadn't even thought about that, like using multiple things at the same time.
Yeah.
That could be very distracting.
Yes, and I know I had a coach previously years ago, Dave Crenshaw, and his whole thing is the myth of multitasking. How we're never being able to really do more things at once. We're just switch tasking. So if our brain is at 100%, full on power, if we're trying to do two things or three things, all of a sudden each one is only getting 5% of our time because we're thinking about the other thing. So when someone comes and talks to you and you're trying to respond to email, every time you look up and look down, you're losing that momentum in whatever it is that you're doing. So to focus on one task until it's finished and then go to the next task. And I know as moms, we always talk about ourselves as being great multitaskers, and now I cringe at this word because I know it doesn't exist. That's not a reality. We're just switching, and we're never finishing one thing before we go to the
Mhm.
next. And it's a daily challenge for me as well, where if I want to do this, I can do this, but really I know that, okay, if I have real work to do, if I'm going to play with my kids, it has to be full on. Because otherwise nobody really benefits and everyone feels a little bit icky at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So where can my listeners find you and reach out if they have any more questions?
So you can actually reach me at mynameisnotmommy.com. There is a contact page, okay. Or if Facebook more is your thing, I have a Facebook page. That one is My Name Is Not Mommy as well. So you can basically find me on all the social media channels. So.
Perfect. And I know you recently did a telesummit where you invited lots of different experts from different fields into your group, not the public page, but into your group. Talk to us about some of the guests you had there. So if they come and join this group, what they have in store for them.
Yeah, so it was actually pretty awesome. It was Mom's Epic Start 2017, and it was a virtual group conference, just kind of giving moms different resources so that they start off their year, so that they started off right. So we had a couple of guest speakers. We had people speak on the starting a new business, so then making sure that you're pursuing your goals, work-life balance, making sure that you're, you're not spread out too far between different things. We had a mom speak about fitness and making sure that you stay in shape and reducing sugar. So we had a lot of amazing guest speakers, and then the videos are still on there. So that's definitely something I would check out.
Yeah, and I know my friend Jen Zills actually was on there, and she did a great video all about kids eating vegetables, and I just love the message she shares, and she's been on the podcast before as well, really trying to help parents understand, what food really looks like and what food we really need. So I thought it was really a brilliant setup of experts that you had on there.
Yeah, and then she had like an amazing example too, where she showed the amount of sugar and stuff. I was like, oh my gosh.
It was shocking. I couldn't believe that too, because some of those, I have to say, were staples in our house. Like, oh no.
Yeah.
we got to rethink that one. And if we can introduce those things when the kids are little versus trying to, go backwards when they're a little older, it makes it a little bit more tricky, for sure.
Definitely.
So before we go, what are like the top 3 recommendations you have for moms about implementing some sort of self-care routine into their lives?
So the first thing I would say is definitely make it a priority. So schedule it, or let the whole family know, like, hey, this is mommy time. That you have to make it a priority, or for moms, it gets pushed aside and it gets forgotten. The second thing is make it non-negotiable in your life. So, a lot of the times we'll put it off because we think there's something else that's a little bit more important, but your self-care is important.
Yes.
So that's something that has to be non-negotiable. And the third thing I would say is to make it a regular routine. So, you don't want to, practice self-care, I'm going to do it this week, and then, 3 weeks later, you're like, oh, I guess I'll do something now.
Yes.
Because then you'll definitely burn out between that time period. So you want to make sure that it's something that you're doing on a regular basis so that you actually fully benefit from that kind of practice.
Yeah, and number 3, I think, is going to be the hardest for me personally, because it's sort of like when it's a new year, everyone goes to join the gym, and for 2 weeks they're there every day for an hour, and they're so sore, and they can barely do anything in their life, and then they just stop going because it gets to be really hard, and they discover that an hour is a really long time. So I totally get that. So listeners, creating some sort of regular routine doesn't have to be every day. That would probably be your recommendation, I imagine. But at least once a week, set aside some time for yourself where you can go read a book or go sit in the sun or go to the pool or take yourself to coffee. Just something to break up the monotony of your routine and do something just for you. Don't feel guilty about it. Just do it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Laneic, I really want to thank you for your time and for your expertise and sharing with moms the importance of self-care and the fact that, it really needs to become this regular habit so we can be the best mommies we can be and then really help our kids grow smarter and more confident through the arts. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Raising Smart Kids 2.0 podcast. To really accelerate your ability to unleash your child's superpowers and raise smarter kids through the arts, We're creating loads of new resources, ways to connect, and ways to celebrate your successes. You can join our free Facebook community by visiting theartsmartparent.com or just search up Raising Smart Kids 2.0 on Facebook. I look forward to seeing you inside our community.